Welcome to Trekosophy, the show about the philosophy of Star Trek. I'm here with Benjamin McLean, Chris McGee, and I'm Bill Allen. And tonight our topic is Elim Garak, the man, the myth, the legend.
The lies.
Legendary lies.
Yeah. When's the first time you actually see Garak? Isn't he...
Episode number 2.
Yeah, he's not in the first episode. What was his first line in that episode?
Oh, now there's a bit of trivia. I've got to go
Yeah,
dig
that'd
out
be a good piece of trivia.
Yeah.
Memory Alpha wiki and see
All I
what
know
it
is
says.
that it's where he walks up behind Bashir and kind of acts a little weird to him.
Yeah, he says something in that concerned tone of voice, like maybe you should watch out and be careful and something like that. You think he's telling Bashir that Bashir ought to be wary of some dangerous group of Bajorans who are obviously not dangerous, but he's suggesting that maybe they really are, or something like that. I don't know. I just vaguely remember him saying something ridiculous. Might not have been that first episode though, but Bashir is really naive, really, really naive. I mean, they write him like that, and I mean, even if you try and go back and read his whole "I'm actually genetically enhanced and I've been hiding this" plot back into everything. I think this was genuine naivete and not part of his act, because not only was Bashir being naive, not only was Bashir pretending to be naive, but he actually was. So Bashir and Garak are both these people who are living with these huge, ginormous lies every day in their lives. And Bashir's big secret of being genetically enhanced mirrors Garak's big secret of being the entire Obsidian Order, except having the entire Obsidian Order in his bathroom. Their headquarters is his bathroom. Yeah, in his house.
That's one theory.
Yes.
Well, I mean, if you look at Garak's history on the show, I'm kind of convinced he really was the head of the Obsidian Order.
Okay, let's get into this then. All right.
Yeah,
so
let's
hear your reasons why you believe Garak is the head of the Obsidian Order.
All
or
right,
at least
well,
what it used to be. They kind of died after season 3, was it? No?
Yeah, middle of season 3, they got wiped out, which is part of what makes me think Garak is the head of it. But first, the Cardassians in general have this interesting philosophy that the end justifies the means. The end, of course, being the success of the state, the benefit of the Cardassian people. Everything is done out of a sense of overwhelming loyalty to the state. In a lot of the early conversations that Garak has with Bashir, he's explaining to him that's how Cardassians think. It's all about loyalty, and the ultimate loyalty is to the state, and you do whatever you can to serve the state. Which is why you can lie, you can cheat, you can kill, as long as it's for the greater good. It's totally acceptable.
Yeah, statist utilitarianism.
And when you look at what Garak does through the course of the show, he is the embodiment of that.
Sure.
Because for a guy who is an exile, he's not very helpful to the people he claims are his friends, unless helping them in some way helps Cardassia or the Obsidian Order. There's an odd kind of political power play going on in the Cardassian Empire, because you have the civilian government, which is supposed to be in charge, and they've spread their power out and branched off. So you have the military branch, and then you have the intelligence branch. And this is supposed to be some kind of Cardassian version of checks and balances, where What actually ends up happening is the military is running everything.
Which is actually what happens in a lot of those tin pot dictator places.
Right.
The military actually runs everything.
And part of what the Obsidian Order is trying to do is stop the military from running everything to keep power in the hands of the state and take a little for themselves at the same time.
The Obsidian Order is trying to keep power in the hands of the Obsidian Order.
Yeah, I
don't think they have any.
Well,
they don't have any noble ethical.
For the lesser agents, I mean, it is a power struggle between the military and the intelligence branch. And Garak, being on the outside, if you ever get a chance to go back and watch it, anytime there's a chance to make the military look bad, Garak is helping out the Federation on Deep Space Nine.
Oh, of course.
Anytime there's a chance that the Obsidian Order looks bad, Garak is nowhere around to give them any advice. And you will occasionally see him cross swords with somebody in the Obsidian Order. But the only time he ever does that was when it was the Obsidian Order going after that civilian resistance movement that was trying to get the power back in the hands of the civilian government and away from the military.
Yeah, well, I think what they were really doing, the resistance was really, they were revolutionaries. I think they wanted to get rid of what they called the civilian government at that point and replace the whole thing. I mean, that's what it sounded like to me anyway. It sounded to me very French Revolution, very vive la résistance.
Well, this was mostly because the civilian government at the time had pretty much ended up being a puppet of the military.
Yeah, government by plot. That is the. I mean, you don't need a coup. You just need a plot in the Cardassian system. But why does that suggest to you that Garak specifically is not just sympathetic to the Obsidian Order, but is actually the head of the Obsidian Order? That's a bit of a taller order than just showing that he has sympathies with the intelligence cause.
Well, what takes it the next step further is the fact that Garak is supposed to be in exile. For a guy who's in exile, who's been exiled by the alleged head of the Obsidian Order, Anabran Taim, he's got an awful lot of contact with agents, and he knows an awful lot about what's going on for somebody who's been burned and been blacklisted. Which means if Anabran Taim is the head of the Order and wanted him cut off, he would be cut off. The only reason he isn't cut off is because he's still an active agent.
Well, hold on though. What about what happened with him and Anabran Taim in that prison camp? You remember that? There's still sympathy between him and Anabran Taim. It's a complicated relationship. Anabran Taim is not straight Garak's enemy.
It is a complicated relationship, but I think that's part of the reason why Garak is alive instead of executed by Anabran Taim, at least in Tain's mind.
Yeah, but that doesn't make Garak the head of the Obsidian Order.
Yeah, that's not really any kind of proof there.
Well, I'm still getting there. It's a convoluted kind of thing because we're dealing with Cardassians here. You know, how many Cardassians does it take to change a light bulb? 3.
Yeah.
It takes 3. 1 to change the bulb and 1 to obfuscate the issue.
And 1 to report back to the Obsidian Order.
Well, no, that's why you think there's 3 because there's only 2, and it's not the best of light bulb jokes, but
no, actually, I got it. I just didn't laugh. Sorry.
It's a light bulb joke. You really shouldn't laugh at those. People wonder about you when you do.
You know what? I'm not even sure what obfuscate means. I thought it meant confuse the issue.
Yeah, that is what it means.
Exactly. So in other words, you got it too.
That's why you. There's 3. There's 1 to change the bulb, and 1 to confuse the issue.
Okay.
But this is what the Cardassians do. Nothing is ever straightforward with them. Even when they tell you the truth, the only time they'll tell you the truth is when the truth is a lie.
Yeah.
But But okay, so back to why.
I still am not getting that Garak is the head of the Obsidian Order. That
Let him
seems
get to
really
it. No, let him get to it. He's
far-fetched.
working
All
on it.
right, all right. Now, I just want to establish first that we can pretty much say that Garak is more than likely still an agent of the Obsidian Order. That he isn't really in exile. He's just under a
Well,
very
there
deep.
might be some evidence to support that. We do know in that episode,
I
the
think that I
first
think
of the
that
two-part
much.
episodes, when they were getting ready to invade the Gamma Quadrant to wipe out the Founders, we found out that yeah, he was definitely a member of the Obsidian Order. There's no question about that. But whether or not he's the controller, the owner, the person who runs the Obsidian Order, that's the part that we're still having trouble with.
Oh yeah, well I'd say once a Marine, always a Marine. He's obviously still an Obsidian Order agent. He's a disgraced Obsidian Order agent, but he's still an agent. They just sent him to what will be regarded as a pretty humiliating kind of assignment.
See, and I'm not even convinced that the assignment was actually all that humiliating. They wanted everybody to think it was humiliating, but there's a lot more going on there as well.
Well, wait, but everybody did think it was humiliating because not all the Cardassians can be Obsidian Order agents or privy to what Garak is doing. The different Cardassians, whether they're from the military or from the intelligence service, all regard Garak's job as being a tailor, as as a him having been disgraced and exiled. I mean, that's what everyone thinks. So,
And that's what they're supposed to think. It's a very deep cover.
um, yeah, I said he's still an agent.
Right.
He's still an agent. He's a disgraced agent. So he's given a job that has to be done from the order's point of view, but doesn't have to be done by someone nearly as important as he is.
See, that's where I disagree with you because I tried to think of why they would want an agent on Bajor. And I think it's more than just keeping tabs on what's going on because they could have used means other than an Obsidian Order agent. Even a disgraced agent, they would have cutouts. They would have so many merchants and traders going through there. They could get information without having to
Yeah, it's
have one
not
of
so
their own
much
guys
getting
on.
information. I mean, how much information do you think Garak really gathers? He's not there to gather information. They already
Or
know everything that they want to know about Bajor. He's
see,
there as an agent who actually makes changes to what's going on.
see, I think part of it was actually Garrick was sent to study and investigate the prophets.
Well,
Now this is probably the thinnest part of my theory here.
that's not what happens in A Stitch in Time, but that's, it could be.
Well, I mean it's I mean once I read the novel I might realize they put it together much better, but I'm just sticking with what we've seen in the original canon here.
Now, before we get out of here, I'm going to have to address Stitch in Time and on what it actually does with Garrick's character, but it's not canon, and we have to go by what's canon in this
Yeah, that's right.
conversation here. So,
Right. So the Bajorans have these mystical orbs, and they're more than just religious relics, since just about anybody who's ever opened the box on the series has had some type of mystical experience. It's definitely
except
tapping into a higher force,
except when.
except Win, but we'll deal with her.
Another episode.
Yeah. So even if you wanted to dismiss the Bajoran religion as a bunch of hokey superstitions,
Can't.
the orbs do speak to the fact that there is something funkier going on.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the Obsidian Order was just assuming it was another case of advanced aliens because 9 times out of 10 in Star Trek, whether it's the original series or the Next Generation or something, they've run into a slew of gods. And they're all really advanced aliens.
That's what they, just about always turn out to be, except the prophets. The prophets have never been, at least not in canon, been brought down to a materialistic level. Uh,
Well, they're
they
just
are in
really,
the they're brought
really advanced aliens.
yeah they're brought down to a materialistic level in the novels, in the DS9 relaunch novels, but not never in canon. So in canon, they're still supernaturalistic to the end. At least the possibility of their being supernaturalistic to the end is never closed, and
But
seems to be reinforced at every turn, as far as I can tell. Um,
I mean, I'll agree with that. I mean, the Bajoran prophets and Q are well. Q is
Q's not really supernatural. He's more sort of a Deadpool character, breaking the fourth wall all the time is
yeah,
what
and pretty
Deadpool does.
omnipotent.
He's got powers like that. He's like Miss Pixin from Superman or Batmite from Batman. He's a joke character, really.
Right, but
I
he
don't
is that healthy dose of magic in a world ruled by science. The
sure.
mix whatever his name is.
Yeah, the guy who's from Superman.
I can't say his name forwards. There's no way I could say it backwards. It's a good thing he's not here.
Mix Picklet. I can't say it either.
Howie
Anyways,
Mandel could say it, and I think Howie Mandel's version was probably my favorite.
okay.
But anyway,
Well,
I'm getting off topic. Sorry.
yeah, sorry.
Okay,
Anyway,
so
the Cardassians want to study the prophets because
right,
the prophets
because
can
whether
grant them
they're
powers like
alien or
traveling back in
supernatural,
time or telling the future.
right? Because whether they're alien, whether they're supernatural, even if they are supernatural, this is something they need to know and understand. And for an intelligence service, knowing the future is pretty important.
Also, there's the ancient rivalry between Cardassia and Bajor, in which Cardassia, in many ways, envies the Bajorans' understanding of the spiritual world. That's hinted at several times, especially in things that Gul Dukat says.
And I mean, when you consider the fact that the Cardassians were definitely the militarily superior force to Bajor at a time of the occupation, um, the possibility that there was some divine intervention along the way is something they need to keep in mind, because I'm not even sure if the Obsidian Order can be honest with themselves enough to admit that a handful of resistance fighters could actually take out the Cardassian occupational force.
Yeah, there's a video game called DS9: The Fallen, and the premise in this video game is that, and I think it connects with A Stitch in Time. The premise in this video game is that one of the major reasons, from the Obsidian Order's point of view anyway, for the Bajoran occupation was that the Obsidian Order wanted to study these things called dark orbs, which are basically the Pah-wraith's equivalent of the Prophet's orbs. The dark orbs are red, where the Prophet's orbs are blue, and they're kind of the anti-orbs.
Right.
It sounds like a 90s 16-bit video game, where you've got to collect. Sonic's got to collect all the gems, but
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. So I wouldn't say that this mission was unimportant, because you don't want to send a halfwit to spy on the gods. Gods might notice.
Okay.
So this is the thinnest part of my theory, is why did the Obsidian Order want somebody on Bajor? I'm working on the assumption they did, because he is still in the order, whether they officially say he's been disgraced or not. So why would they want him there? And the only thing I could think of that Bajor has of value is the prophets and that connection to the prophets.
Well, they obviously want him there after the wormhole opens. They want someone there, someone really competent.
Exactly. And instead of having another Cardassian show up to help Garak, they leave Garak on post, because it turns out that ties into his main mission anyway. According to what Cisco says, the prophets live in the wormhole.
Well, I don't know if he actually says they live in the wormhole, but the wormhole is the gateway to the Celestial Temple. The prophets live in the Celestial Temple. So it's not quite the same thing. It's close, though.
Well, given their nature of how they interact with time and space anyway. I don't really think they have an in anything. So in is just
Yeah,
always going to be the wrong word there, but it's the closest I've got because
yeah,
I,
sure.
I don't really speak prophet.
Yeah, but I mean, it's touching on the idea in Earth theology that heaven isn't literally a place that is up in the clouds that you could get in an airplane and fly to. You know, I
Right.
mean, very few Christians have ever believed that, or Jews or Muslims or whatever. Um, so it's kind of that is an important distinction. I mean, it makes for great Precious Moments cartoons or whatever, or Bugs Bunny cartoons or wherever. But it's not heaven being in the sky is a metaphor, and it's the
Right.
same thing with the prophets being in the wormhole. The wormhole being a gateway between two places that are really far away. I think it's sort of hinting at this sort of idea that the prophets have access to all of time and space. And I think that's sort of what that you know is supposed to symbolize for the Bajoran people is that they are not limited by your concept of time and space.
Right. 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 Right.
Anyways, but how do we keep getting onto the prophets when we need to talk about is Garak? Um,
Okay. Well, that's because that's Garrick's mission is
so
to study them and follow them, which
so
is
you think that the whole Obsidian Order, the most important thing for all of the Obsidian Order is actually the prophets?
yes. Not for
Wow.
the whole, they're not committing the whole order to it, but this is the kind of thing where you're going to need your best person on
Well,
it.
it's the most
And
important project, like the Manhattan Project.
yes, I mean, this is that breach between science and superstition. It's, reaching out to something that is so far beyond anything they've ever encountered. It's the ultimate getting the ultimate answer to the ultimate question, and intelligence is all about getting answers to questions. So, I mean, I think it ranks, if they had that tangible proof that there really were gods, they'd want somebody spying on those gods, and you'd need the best.
Okay.
And if you're going to be running the Obsidian Order, given the nature of that place, I can't think of anybody incompetent having somebody more competent under him, unless it's just a front, which is why I don't believe Enabrantain was the head of the Obsidian Order, because everybody knows Enabrantain was the head of the Obsidian Order.
Everybody
Okay,
knows
I
J.
see.
Edgar Hoover was the head of the FBI.
Well, the FBI was a police force, not an intelligence service. And the FBI isn't built around training
At the
habitual
time,
liars to make them
at the
even better
time,
at it.
at the time, the FBI was pretty much both. Under Hoover, it was pretty much both. I mean, J. Edgar Hoover was an Auburn is basically supposed to be J. Edgar Hoover. I mean, I never questioned that when watching the show. I was like, oh look, it's a J. Edgar Hoover character. Okay. I mean, because he, head of an intelligence service. He's an old guy, and he's got all these secrets going on. Um, he's, you know, and yeah, I mean, that's what I thought the cultural comparison was with an Aubertane. Um, that and a couple other Soviet figures I can't remember the names of. Um, but the point is, I don't think I think you're going too far in saying that Anabrantane never was the head of the Obsidian Order. I think Anabrantane recruited and trained Garak and intended Garak to be his successor. But like Marcus Aurelius in that Gladiator movie, found out that, at least in his opinion, at least, Garak was not up to snuff. He became disappointed in Garak, and why he became disappointed in Garak is something people have speculated about a lot. In A Stitch in Time, he's disappointed in Garak because Garak uh, gets a girlfriend who is involved in the resistance, even though he's the head of the Obsidian Order. He doesn't believe anything she says about the resistance, but he's in love with her. And he doesn't turn her in. Um, and Anabrantain finds out about this, and he even sets up a situation in which Garak had the big opportunity to turn her in, and he doesn't turn her in and her whole cell and her whole organization, and he doesn't because he's in love with her. So as a result, she gets killed and he gets exiled. He's still a member of the Obsidian Order because as long as you're alive, you're still a member of the Order. But um, he's put in a position where he no longer makes important policy decisions about what happens inside the Cardassian Empire, which is what he specialized in before. Have you ever seen that movie Enemy of the State? They say, you ever seen the Hubble telescope? The guy says in Enemy of the State. Well, for every telescope they got looking out at the stars, they got 200 more looking back at us. And I think that's probably where the real strength of the Obsidian Order typically, I think, is inside the Cardassian Empire, is where it is most formidable and where most of its big decisions get made and where most of its power is, at least politically. Um, and so that's why I think Garak isn't the head of the Obsidian Order. I think he was in line to be a head of the Obsidian Order and didn't make it. And I think he uses his contacts and he keeps abreast of everything that happens because he's hoping to find some way to lie, cheat, steal, or buy his way back into power, at least for the first few seasons, before the Obsidian Order, is destroyed. And I think if they were smart enough to really care about the prophets that much, and realize the potential power there, they wouldn't have been dumb enough to get themselves destroyed in that really stupid space battle they had.
Well, I think, see, that was the one that tipped me off to thinking that he was the head, because Garak didn't start looking into it until 5 other agents died. And
that suggests to me that he's out of the loop.
Well, I mean, he didn't know how they died. He just knew his agents had dropped off and didn't realize that his front man had been doing the killing. And maybe I've just read a little too much Robert Jordan, because every spy master in there, the most famous man for being the most dangerous spy in the world, is an idiot, and the quiet little secretary is the real spy.
Yeah.
And Honor Harrington has Anton Zilwicki, who is spy master to the Star Empire. Only everybody knows who he is now, so they all assume he's a spy, and he's not a spy anymore, but nobody believes him. Because you can't be a spy and be famous for being a spy. It kind of defeats the purpose.
Yeah, it's like when Garak said about the James Bond thing. Obviously, I joined the wrong intelligence service.
Yeah. But I remember that episode, he actually loses contact with 5 of his agents, who were, I guess, assigned to spy on the Tal Shiar, which is why they got popped first. And
Yeah.
It was all Enabrantain's power play to combine with the Romulan intelligence service to go after the founders, which was not authorized by Garak. It was just his subordinate showing initiative, and it went horribly wrong. Which is how he could manage to... I mean, for a guy in exile, Garak can find his way back into Cardassian space fairly easily.
Yeah, of course he can. I don't think that undermines the idea that he really is in exile, because the Cardassian Empire is a really large empire. I mean, imagine someone it's like the Roman Empire. I mean, you can be banished from the Roman Empire, but
There's no way they can track you. It's that big.
yeah, and that's how big the Cardassian Empire is. Even though it's falling apart, it's still really, really big. Much bigger than just Cardassia.
Yeah, it could be that I don't know. It's just there's something about Garak and the way the Cardassian intelligence service, the way they think, the way they lie. The most likely person to be the head of the Obsidian Order is the person you'd least suspect.
Yeah, well, the thing is, that's why Garak can't be it, because he is obviously suspicious.
Well, he's suspicious for being a member, but everybody thinks he's a disgraced agent. They don't, and so of all the Obsidian Order agents you know about, the disgraced agent
they
would
don't
be the
s-
least likely to be the.
Well, he doesn't start out as being obviously a disgraced agent, at least not from the Starfleet people's point of view. They think he's pretty much
Still active.
still active, and they think he's probably best buddies with what's his face, the bad guy. Oh gosh,
Ducat.
yeah, Ducat. They think he's probably still best buddies with Ducat.
All right,
Takes
well,
them a while to figure out that him and Ducat are not on the same team.
let me ask you this here. You're saying that basically he's not in exile. He's on the station pretty much to spy on the Bajorans and find out more about their profits and find out ways to get at them. Let me ask you this. Remember in the episode The Wire when he basically started going not necessarily insane, but just he going through withdrawal symptoms. Wouldn't you think that someone going through those symptoms would start to tell a little bit more about how they really feel? And he did even mention how much he hates the Bajorans, how much he hates being on the station, etc., etc. Unless you think that's some sort of extremely elaborate lie there, which I wouldn't put past him, but I'm not sure if he'd be capable of doing it under those circumstances.
No, I think you're right. I think he really does hate the Bajorans, and he really does hate being away from home. But at the same time, given how easily he can slip into Cardassia with his skills and their size, he can get away from his exile and go home, even though he's exiled. If he didn't want to be on that station, he could leave if he was really exiled and a free agent. He's there for a reason, and he's doing it even though he hates it because he does have that loyalty to the state above all else. That what was it? The authoritarian.
Yeah, but
Okay.
your claim isn't just that he's loyal, but that he's the head of the Obsidian Order, and that's the big weak spot in your scheme here.
Well,
I mean, you can say he's a big spy. Okay, I get that he's
Yeah,
a
I
big
can, I
spy.
can swallow
I
that
think
one.
I think it's obvious that he's very important in the Obsidian Order. I don't see as how that necessarily makes him the head of it, though.
all right. Well, I got you halfway. I'll settle for that.
Well, I
And I'm
haven't
trying
really
to think
changed
back
my
to
mind here.
I'm trying to think back to the episode when he met back with Auburn, the first part of that two-parter thing, and they had a moment where they were talking alone. And I would think I can't remember the conversation they had exactly. They were reminiscing on old times in the Obsidian Order. Did they say anything at that time about in relation to which one was in charge?
Yeah, and Auburn was in charge in that conversation. He recruited
They
Garak. Garak was an interrogator, and Auburn was the guy that he was supposed to report to back then. And Auburn obviously much older than Garak. It just doesn't make sense that an Auburn would ever have been Garak's subordinate.
But in that same conversation, when an Abrantane is saying, "Yeah, I killed all these agents because when I go back, I don't need my dirty secrets coming out, so I've been eliminating anybody who could be a threat to me returning to active duty." That's his official story for all his crazy plan. He also says he's planning on killing his secretary, and Garak tells him not to.
Which links up with why Garak got exiled, because he's a softie.
He is a softie, but at the same time, an Abrantane agreed not to kill the secretary.
He's
So for
also a
this,
softie. He's
he's a little soft in the head for different reasons,
He
but
goes soft in his old age. That's what he said.
that's what he's saying. But I mean, it's also that gives him an out to save a little face while he's obeying Garak's orders. Garak, I mean, Garak,
I don't
even when
think
he,
that shows he's Garrick's subordinate. I mean, just because one of your that does not show that he's Garrick's subordinate at all. I'm sorry, that
that
does not.
by itself is not enough. But if you watch the entire thing, Garak never gives anybody any orders, whether they're Cardassian, whether they're over him, under him, but somehow he gets everybody to do what he wants.
Yeah, that's because he is.
Just that good.
Yeah, he's just that good, but
So,
he's not.
okay.
That doesn't put him in charge. That just makes him really manipulative.
And if he can manipulate the guy in charge, he's the power behind the throne.
Oh, sure. If you want to say that Garrick is in charge in the sense that he could manipulate whoever is nominally in charge of the Obsidian Order, whoever, oh, sure, I guess, psychologically in charge of the Obsidian Order. Okay, I guess I could buy that. As
Yeah, I
far
have
as
to.
as far as him being able to set the entire policy of the Obsidian Order in every area, though, and actually being able to command any Obsidian Order agent he wants, I'm sorry, no, I don't think he could do that.
Well, maybe I'm just being overly paranoid, but when you watch Garak long enough, you really can't help but be a little paranoid.
Well, of course, everyone's out to get you.
Yeah.
And it's something about the way he operates, and I think part of it is I don't think the Obsidian Order has that, like you say, he oversees every operation. I don't think the Obsidian Order has like a rigid operational structure like that. They basically want everyone to be as
In the dark as possible.
in the dark, on their own, independent as possible. If there's no chain of command, you've got plausible deniability. The military needs that rigid discipline in order to coordinate the entire army's movements, but when you're needing to coordinate the actions of one guy on one planet, just let him go do his thing. You don't need to double check his every little move. So I don't think you need a leader who has that sort of operational oversight over every detail. The Obsidian Order doesn't do details. They do,
Well,
here's what needs to be done, make it happen.
They have to do details. They're an intelligence gathering service. I can tell you how their organization is structured in A Stitch in Time. It goes into that in really great detail. The thing about A Stitch in Time is it is it's sort of Garrick's The Killing Joke. Have you ever seen The Killing Joke, the comic book?
Yes.
The Killing Joke's kind of the ultimate Joker comic book. The ultimate comic book about the Joker that is supposed to really capture everything about the Joker's character and what makes him so scary. And so A Stitch in Time sets out to be Garak's Killing Joke. This novel that's supposed to capture everything about Garak. It does a pretty good job, except Garak hardly ever lies during the book. And the premise of the book is that he's writing to a former colleague to sort of spill the beans finally. And the premise that he's actually going to do that is a really bad premise for the character. But given that premise, it's developed really well. You know what I'm saying? Bad premise, but it's developed really well. And anyway, it gives you a pretty good idea of how Cardassian society works and the structure of the Obsidian Order and Garrick's place in it and why Garak was exiled, and it goes into lots of detail. And one of the things I'm trying to let's see. It's hard to decide what order to put all this stuff in that I might just mention from that book. One thing is, after graduating from a regular standard military education and then from a sort of generic spy school where you don't meet anyone that you're actually going to work with during spy school, but you learn the skills you need to learn. When you actually get down to work, you are given a new name and an apartment and a job working for the government somewhere. And at one on one occasion, you and about 8 other people show up at this basically at a cell meeting. And it's the only cell meeting you ever have. You never have a cell meeting ever again. But you meet 8 people and are supposed to memorize their faces and code names. And you have like a radio that's like surgically implanted in your ear or whatever that you use like once, maybe every 2 or 3 years or something like that, to report, that whatever your last objective you were given gets completed or whatever. You know what I'm saying? But it's basically, yeah, you never ever encounter the Obsidian Order, like, ever, other than knowing you're a member of it, and you know what I'm saying? But it's like the very bare minimum of communication goes on. But the thing is, you do know, you don't know anyone except the people immediately surrounding you and your immediate superior. And you also have to take orders not only from your immediate superior, but from anybody else around you. So you've been trained so that you know the organization's agenda, and you would be able to give orders to anyone on the same level as you. And you have to take orders from anyone on the same level as you, and from your immediate superior. And that's all you know. You don't know anybody else. You don't know any other code names or anything else like that. Your name's on their files somewhere in some deep dark basement, but that's about it, you know. And so yeah, there's not too much to it. They kind of show up in the middle of the night to give you an assignment, like out of nowhere, like that guy from Section 31.
Right.
They do that Warehouse 13, Mrs. Frederick thing. Um, and that's about it. But the thing is, at the top levels of the organization, there's an office that's a lot like what you'd expect the CIA or FBI office in Washington D.C. or Langley, Virginia, or wherever it is to be like. Except it's all in Cardassian instead of in English, and they drink whatever the Cardassian drink is instead of Coke, or but same deal. And that's where they have all their records, and they know who's in the organization, who's not. They've got lists and all that, and they make people new identities there and all that stuff. But there are top officials there who actually are in charge, who have a budget, who actually run the spy school, who. And anyway, my point is, there is somebody who is in charge at the top of it. And that somebody controls the spy school, and the spy school, the only way you could really change the long-term program of the Obsidian Order would be to change the curriculum. It's really the only way.
Okay.
Other than exposing a lot of your agents, it's really the only way. They all of the members are passionately, ideologically committed to the group's goals, and it's their rigid orthodoxy that actually keeps the group a group. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It after spy school, it's almost more of an ideology than an organization. And at least that's how I understood the book to be saying. Of course, Garak's experience is atypical because he rises to near the very top levels almost immediately because of his friendship with. He's actually Enabran Tane's illegitimate son, and Enabran Tane really wanted him in the organization. So it's because of Enabran Tane that he got recruited, and he goes to school. He goes to the same school with what's his face, Dukat, and so that's how he knows Dukat, and he also runs into Dukat on like his first mission or whatever. And so Garak's experience, as I understand the book, is fairly atypical because he goes to near the top levels of the organization almost right away, and he um, he is sent on a mission to this medical conference with the Federation and the Klingons and the Romulans, and supposed to poison somebody or something like that. And anyway, I'm starting to ramble now. Anyway, the point is that book. Yeah, sorry about that. That book tells you almost everything you would possibly want to know about the Obsidian Order, at least from the author's perspective. And it's kind of plausible. It's not quite as cool as some of the Earth spy novels because other than that first cell meeting, it's kind of boring to be an Obsidian Order agent, you know?
Yeah,
um,
which makes it more like being a real spy than a
yeah,
movie spy anyway.
that's the thing. But Garak lives a life that's like a movie spy because he goes to almost, to the top levels of the organization almost right away, and he is the master liar. He is, even among other Cardassians, he is the master liar. He knows how to lie all the
That's
time.
impressive.
Yeah, it's an art form with him. I
Right.
really love the time when he tries to practice on Worf. Wasn't it Worf? Tries to practice on
Yeah,
Worf.
that's right, because he wanted to apply it to Starfleet. He was telling Worf.
Yeah, that was so funny. And Worf, I feel
Worf
sorry.
almost bought it.
Almost spotted. I feel sorry for Worf. I mean, after all, if the little kid, what's his name?
Nog.
Yeah, Nog. If he's serious about getting to Starfleet, you just never know, you know?
Well, I mean, you can't really fault Worf either. I mean, because there's a real difference between the Klingon mind and the Cardassian mind.
Yeah.
While the Cardassians are all about the end justifying the means, no matter what the means are, the Klingons are the opposite. It's the means that justify the end to them. And as long as your means are honorable, you can lose, but you're still honorable and heroic and you did the right thing. Failure is only a failure if you cheat.
Yeah, sort of. At least that's that is the more honorable of the Klingons. That is their mindset. Of course, they don't always stick to that.
Well, they're also violent and bloodthirsty, but I mean, of the honorable Klingons, I mean, Worf
I'm not
is.
saying the honorable Klingons aren't violent, bloodthirsty. All the Klingons are violent, bloodthirsty. I'm saying that some of them have this sort of warrior ethic, and other ones cheat. And their idea of honor is esteemed by other Klingons instead of, honor being adherence to a rigid moral code.
Which is, I think, what makes both Garak and Worf such interesting characters because they are both the epitome of what their species should be. Because Worf really is that guy who's about honor above all else, and
Uh,
he'll even accept dishonor if it's the honorable thing to do.
yeah, Worf's the epitome of what Klingons ought to be. Garak, I wouldn't say that about Garak. Garak isn't what Cardassians ought to be. He's kind of a bad guy. He's a cool bad guy, but he's still a bad guy.
Well, I mean, he's not really a bad guy. I
Well,
mean,
he
if you know
starts
his
out as a
motive
bad guy
is
anyway.
he's not trustworthy at all, but his one goal is preservation of the Cardassian Empire, and he does whatever it takes to get that done. Which is why he went with the Federation when the Dominion took over, because he knew the Dominion would be bad news for his homeworld, and he wanted to free them.
Yeah.
Everything Garak does is done out of loyalty to the state. It might look like it's serving his personal ambitions, but when Dukat does something, it's serving his personal ambitions. When Garak does something, it looks like he's just angering all of his employers, but it ends up serving the needs of the state.
Yeah. Garak is kind of the ultimate utilitarian. No principles except maximizing the benefit of the one thing he's after. Um, and the end always justifies the means for Garak. Also, Garak's got this sort of dark, scary cynicism going on, uh, like how he is prepared to kill the Romulan senator in order to bring Romulus into the war, and just assumes pretty much that that's the only way to do it from the get-go.
But what makes that scary? The fact that he would kill so easily, or the fact that he might actually be right?
The fact that he'd kill so easily. I mean, if I was Cisco, I don't think I would have made the same decision Cisco made in that episode, because I think it's more important in the long term to do the right thing than to win. But like I said, I agree more with Worf. But I think though that Garak, any Starfleet officer would have found another way to get that done. And if there wasn't one, they would invent one. They would, they would invent a third option. That's what Starfleet's kind of all about. The best Starfleet officers, anyway, it's all about trying to invent, a third option, because that's not good enough. That's not acceptable. We've got to find a better way to do that. And Garak, says, "Screw it, cut your losses." So big contrast there in values.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That was when Cisco actually started to solidify for me as a character, because he.
It made Cisco much more interesting as a character. I just didn't think it was the right thing to do, is all.
I'm still not sure about that either. I mean,
well, we could probably have an entire episode devoted to In the Pale Moonlight.
Yeah.
We probably should. I mean,
we need to have a whole episode on In the Pale Moonlight, and we need to have a whole episode on Measure of a Man. The big data trial.
Mm-hmm.
And we need, I probably ought to add In the Pale Moonlight to our list of future episodes. Let's think about the role of lying. There's a really great quote from V for Vendetta, and that is, artists use lies to tell the truth, while politicians use the truth to tell lies. Or maybe it was the other way around.
No, I think you got it right the first time.
Oh, good. But basically, yeah. And so Garak's power to, Garak's power to deceive people is used sometimes for the right thing, and sometimes for the wrong thing. Sometimes Garak acts like a politician, and sometimes he acts like an artist, depending on the situation. He changes his mind several times. I think he's not quite sure what he wants.
See, I'm not entirely convinced that's all his fault, though. I think he is always lying consistently, but people have a tendency to, since they always assume he's lying, sometimes they'll react as if the lie he's telling leads to a different truth than the truth it's pointing at. It's one of those weird, I don't even know if I said that coherently so it makes sense, but it's not so much that it's the way Garak lies that changes what happens, it's how people react to his lies. He always lies the same way.
Well, you can't always lie the same way. What are you talking about?
You can't always tell the same lie, but you can always lie. And Garak is extremely consistent with the way he lies, not with what he lies about. Every lie is always different. I think that was his point in one of the episodes. I think he did say that the moral of the story for the boy who cried wolf is never tell the same lie twice.
Oh yeah, that's
Right.
right.
That's what I was thinking of.
But there's a difference
Very
between
Garrick. That's
telling the same lie and telling two different lies the same way. And for people who don't lie, they're not very good at it, so they misinterpret his lie and they read it wrong and they make the wrong calls, which forces him to improvise further. Because it's interesting, nobody on Deep Space Nine plays poker.
Wait, Worf does.
Worf used to. I mean, every version of Star Trek had a game, and
Wait a minute. When did the TOS people play poker?
no, they had a game. It was always a different game for each series.
Oh, what did they?
TOS had 3D chess,
They had the chess.
Oh, of course, 3D chess. Yeah, I remember that.
and the Next Generation had poker and everybody's personal holodeck programs.
DS9 has Tongo.
DS9, well, Tongo is like a screwy Ferengi version of poker where it's more like a cross between poker and Monopoly.
Yeah.
So I don't think bluffing comes in as much as counting the odds.
Wait, bluffing did come in a couple episodes in Tongo.
But never to the extent that it does in poker.
Well,
Well, the point I'm trying to make on this
depends on who
wild
you're
tangent
playing
of
with
mine-
and how good they are.
Yeah, that's true. But that's kind of the point I was trying to make, and I just went off on a weird tangent. Is
Sorry.
Garak wouldn't be able to lie to Riker.
Why not?
Riker's a better poker player. If that makes any sense at all.
I don't know. I don't know whether
I mean,
Garak
Riker-
might be taken in by Riker, but I don't know whether Garak would be unable to bluff Riker. I mean,
well, I think I should rather say that Riker would never misunderstand the nature of Garak's lie.
oh.
If that's, I don't know.
You think Riker would see through Garak?
I think Riker would be very good at playing Garak's game by Garak's rules, and when you have two people playing by the same rules, the game goes the way it's supposed to go.
Oh, so the highest hand would win.
Yeah. I mean, Garak would eventually win because he's the one dealing, and
Who said? But okay. I didn't think he'd be the one dealing because it's not an Earth game. I mean, it's not a Cardassian game.
well, I mean, I think that's probably why he would be, well, metaphorically speaking.
I was going to say, I
When
think you're
Garak-
using a metaphor there.
Yeah,
Oh, I thought you were talking about what if Riker and Garak were literally playing poker, who would win? I was like, oh, that's interesting.
okay, that's a much more interesting question, but I was metaphorically speaking. The poker game is the ability to lie.
Okay.
And Riker
I'm not a
could,
big poker player myself, so I'm a little bit of an outsider in this conversation.
but Riker, I think, of all the Federation characters, Riker would have the best capacity to follow Garrick's lies where they're supposed to go, instead of ending up in the blind alley that just looking at the lie sends you to. If that makes sense, Garak lies for a purpose, and if you can, it's like talking in riddles. You never know exactly what he's saying. You gotta muddle through and solve the riddle to figure out what he was actually saying. Everything he says is in code.
Yeah. And he's all kinds of fun. Not everything he says is in code. Here's the thing.
Well, that's
Here's the thing. Everything important he says is in code. But here's the thing. Him and every other Cardassian character seem to always have this array of things to say about small personal comforts and sentimentalities and things that they regard as being sort of untouchable from a perspective of all the politics. And that's the thing about Cardassians is they seem to regard unless there's been an adultery, they seem to regard family as untouchable beyond politics. You don't attack somebody's family just because they're a political rival. And they seem to have this sort of unwritten rules that sort of underlie a lot of their their lying society, you know. So it's complicated, you know. There's certain things on Cardassia you just don't do, no matter how deep in the plots you are. Um, and the only time they make an exception for that is if a high official gets caught in adultery. And in that case, that things really hit the fan. You know, that's just not acceptable uh, publicly
Yeah.
for Cardassians.
I think that goes back to that loyalty thing again. Loyalty is the only value they really have. Whether it's to the state or to the family, that's the only thing they actually value as far as morals go.
Yeah, there's this really interesting scene in, like I said, A Stitch in Time does a great job of covering every aspect of Garak's character, really, except for the lying. But so leaving that out, there's a really interesting scene in A Stitch in Time in which Garak goes to a meeting. Uh, Elections are coming up for the first time on Cardassia, free elections, and Garak is going to a meeting of people who are trying to rebuild the old order, and he's felt really confused and conflicted. What do we really need? And at this meeting, he sort of sees for the first time how sort of empty everybody is in who is still clinging to the old order. And it's at that point that he finally makes up his mind what side he's on. And sort of the idea there, at least from this author's perspective, is that Garak never truly made up his mind what side he was on, even to the very last in DS9. And so we're always confused about what side he's on because he was confused as well. He was never sure what side he was on either. And I thought that was an interesting take on Garak's character. Because there's a lot of different ways that his character could be interpreted. I never thought somebody would carry on arguing that he was the head of the Obsidian Order. That was kind of a curveball. But
Yeah, I've been exposed to too many other weird spy stories where the guy you think is in charge is never really the guy in charge. It's always the janitor.
yeah, well, I'm kind of counting on the Star Trek narrative to show us what's important for us to see. You know what I mean? I'm expecting the Star Trek narrative to focus on showing us what's important for us to see. Um, and because of that, that's kind of how I'm interpreting everything we know about the Obsidian Order.
Yeah, it's possible I'm overthinking it. I mean, I just recently rewatched the episode where Tane launches his sneak attack and forces Garak to torture Odo for information.
Yeah.
And the first scene where Odo is just sitting there angrily, Garak starts talking to him and he's saying all these things. Oh, we've been such good friends and we've had such great adventures, and everything he says, I mean, it's a crazy lie. It's an obvious lie. We know it's a lie. And then right before he leaves, he says, I want you to think over my words very carefully. And then he walks out. So I rewind and watch that scene again, thinking he's tried to send some kind of coded signal to Odo. Which words would be the key words? Where's the real message?
Well,
And
you're
I
really
spent
digging in
20
deep on
minutes
this.
Well, when he says, I want you to think about what I said very carefully, I started, I never saw it. I don't think there was one.
Expecting it to follow ordinary spy conventions. I never really expected the writers to get that deep in terms of encoding code in Trek dialogues.
Yeah, it's probably not. And we're talking about Star Trek here. We're not talking about some of the more hefty spy shows.
Yeah, I've come to realize
that thing in a series of unfortunate events where something that doesn't make any sense to be coded is coded anyway. And
after all, we're talking about a show that gave us Move Along Home.
Like I said, I think Move Along Home was fun. I don't understand why everybody doesn't like that.
It was all right. I mean, it did have that weird Deus Ex Machina ending for that whole wrap up. But
It was fun. It reminded me of going back to like the original series. Just weird aliens show up. They have weird stuff happening, and it actually had some character development in it too. So yeah, don't diss that episode too hard. It was fun. Anyway,
well, we've been kind of monopolizing the conversation. Chris, what are your thoughts on Garak?
My thoughts pretty much parallel your own, except for the fact that he's you know, head of the Obsidian Order. That's the only part I don't agree with. I do see your idea that maybe he is still working for the Obsidian Order the entire time that he is at Deep Space Nine, undercover. That argument is valid, even though there isn't a lot of hard evidence to support it. But I'll go along with that theory. That's okay with me. I think he is probably one of the most, if not the most, interesting character on the show. And I always cheer whenever I see him coming on screen. Even my roommate, who has not really been a big fan of the early shows of Deep Space Nine, whenever Eric Garrick walked on, he would immediately perk up and get interested and watch it.
Yeah, he's definitely a crowd pleaser.
I'd say that's
there's
pretty
that
much the summary of my thoughts on Garrick, I suppose.
okay. There's that one episode where the Wire.
Mhm.
How close do you think the Wire gets us that episode to the real Garrick, if there is such a person?
I think it probably, as much as I'd like to say we did see the real Garrick there when he was going through withdrawal, at the end he pretty much said, well, everything was a lie. So, I don't know. It's hard for me to tell. And I think that's the way he wants it too.
I think most of the things he said, especially when he looks really weak, I think the different things he says then are all true in different ways. Um, you know, especially since sometimes he'll talk about himself in the third person and stuff. In some of those,
Yeah.
but I think he is getting down to the real story, and just random bits of it are coming out, and everything he says happened to him. It just happened to him in different contexts and not always from the perspective he tells it from. And he also, but that's when he's looking really weak, when he breaks down crying and all that stuff. But when he looks happier and like maniacal and stuff, I think he's making a lot more of that up. Because he's smart enough to know that the way to keep, if a secret is going to come out, then what you need to do is do what the United States Congress has learned to do, and that is bury the really dangerous stuff in 300 pages of nonsensical, unrelated drivel. And that's what he does. He hides the real truth by, um, putting it in a Where's Waldo maze of a whole bunch of other similar looking stuff that he makes up to cover up for that few moments when he might have been telling the real truth in there. And I think that's kind of interesting. Also, though, I think it's important to sort of realize that Garak is really a very sad character. He's a sad character because he's always hidden behind his mask after mask after mask. And not cool masks like the V for Vendetta guy. I mean, masks that trap him as much as conceal his real identity.
That's
And
pretty good there. Yeah, that way he can never really be his true self around anyone.
yeah, I mean, I would say his humanity because in a sense, I think I said in the first episode, I think there are no alien values on Star Trek. I think all of the values on Star Trek are in fact human values that have been reshuffled from different cultures and different real life situations. So when I say his humanity has been very much compromised and violated by his decisions to get deeper and deeper into the world of intelligence and counterintelligence and plots and lies and politics and all this stuff. And by the time he comes out of it, he has lost himself, and I
Well,
think
not only
that's the
that,
sad part.
he also is. It's also sad in another way, in that he's worked so hard in all these years to do everything he can in the best interests of Cardassia, and when he finally goes home to Cardassia in the end, once Cardassia's finally free, what happens? Oh, it's in ruins. So all this that he's done in he's tried worked so hard in a way to free Cardassia, and then boom, it's just been destroyed pretty much.
Yeah, there's something somebody said one time, and I wish I could remember who it was because it was really good. But it was about lies. It was about how lies actually trap the person who tells them. Um, you become trapped in the reality, the false reality that you've created, and the burden of maintaining it gets greater and greater and greater the deeper into the lie you go. It's just reminding me of that. There's that VeggieTales episode, Larry Boy, and the fib. Has everybody seen that one? Larry Boy and the fib from outer space.
Never
Has
watched
anyone seen
any
that one?
VeggieTales. Sorry.
Oh, well, this is actually a good one. It's a Batman parody where Larry the Cucumber is supposed to be Batman. Sort of like it's a lot like the 1989 Batman movie. It's a parody of that one. And this sort of little alien ball thing like falls down from outer space like a meteor. And Junior Asparagus, little kid character, uh, breaks his dad's bowling plate, like that his dad won for as a bowling trophy or whatever. And he sweeps it up, and and the little alien comes along and tells him to lie about it. Tells him, well, just tell him that Laura did it. And so when he says Laura did it, that causes the fib, the alien, to grow. Like he's like twice as big. And then somebody else says, "There's no way." Somebody else comes up and says, "I heard that you said Laura did it, but there's no way Laura could have done it." And he says, "No, I didn't mean that at all. I meant Lenny did it." And he tells the story of Laura doing it, where she tripped and fell. But when he says Lenny did it, then he goes into this big, long, elaborate, ridiculous story. Or well, it's not quite ridiculous yet. It's implausible. And so they believe that. And when he turns around, the fib is like kangaroo sized, where it was like Pokemon sized before. And finally, he tells uh, like a real ridiculous whopper at the end of it. And then he turns around, and the fib is Godzilla sized and picks him up and tries to eat him. Because every time he tells a lie, like Pinocchio's nose, the fib gets bigger and bigger until finally it is turned into a monster. And Garak, as a character, he
It's a
has
nice
to live with
metaphor. I
that
kind of like that.
monster. Yeah, Garak, as a character, he has to live with that monster every day. He's Pinocchio with the nose that is in his way in everything he does, and he can never shave it off. So
Yeah.
that's who Garak is. ultimately, and that's kind of sad. It makes him a fun character. He's a lot like Jack Sparrow, you know. Um, but as a person, people who are like that are actually really sad. Anyways.
Well, that's a pretty good summary of them, I'd say.